Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
And welcome in live coast to coast on the BetQL network. Wherever you may be in the world, right there inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY. It's free. Download it today. And of course, on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel as well, on Twitch, twitch.tv/BetQL. We get you ready every single weekend, and somehow we managed to get to everything within just 1 little hour alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. Welcome in to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. And yeah, we'll look back on week one in just a second, but there's a lot to look ahead to in week two. A couple of interesting rivalry matchups worth talking about. And maybe just one team who thinks, hey, the conference is wide open. A big win at home could change things for us, or a neutral site, I guess. We'll get into that one. We'll get into the biggest matchup of the week, number 3 against number 10, Texas and Michigan in the Big House. First look at Heisman odds as well. Plenty to get to. But let's start with a look back, boys, on week one. And there were plenty of teams that come out of week one who – we're not mad at you. It's like Dad when you took the car for a spin and you weren't supposed to because you didn't ask, and then you didn't fill it up with gas when you brought it back anyway. Or maybe you filled up the vodka bottle with water and thought nobody would notice in the downstairs bar. Either way, we're not mad. We're just disappointed. We'll get to those teams in a couple of minutes. Let's talk first and foremost about the teams who brought home A-pluses on the report card in week one. Georgia blows out Clemson. Once again, looks like the best team in the country. Penn State handles their business after a 2.5-hour plus lightning delay against West Virginia. And on the road, Miami looks like cream of the crop in the ACC. They take care of Florida. Notre Dame beats Texas A&M on the road in College Station. And USC takes care of LSU in Vegas. Choppy, I'll start with you. Of all the teams that had impressive wins in week one, who impressed you the most?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of teams really have a really good case here. I'm going to, though, go with Georgia. And the main reason is that they really just kind of showed, it was really between them and Ohio State to me as to who the two best teams were. And they really showed, like, okay, we belong here. It's not, they didn't lose too many guys, even though they lose guys every year. It's not a letdown. This is Georgia, and they're going to be there at the very end. And if they are not the favorites to win the SEC, I don't know who possibly could be, because it should be absolutely them and then everybody else. So yeah, it was Georgia. I don't want to say it because it's just boring now. It's just every year it's Georgia's the best team, but they are the best team.
Favored to win the national championship at almost 3-1, John, plus 280 at BetMGM, and a full minus 650. You got to pay almost $7 for Georgia to make the playoff. I think Choppy's right. They probably had the most impressive performance because it was the most dominant. You go into halftime and you're thinking, oh, maybe we get what we got a few years ago between these two teams, a battle with no offensive touchdowns, all defense. But they come out in the second half, and it was hot knife, meat, butter against that Clemson defense. I thought Miami, too, for what it's worth. As we mentioned, the ACC looks like it's their conference to take by the throat, the way they handled business on the road in the swamp.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part of this is trying to determine who the result says more about, right? And I think, in that Miami case, it really says more about Florida. I mean, I'm not saying that Miami can't be the winner of the ACC, obviously, with what Florida State has done with their season already, and with, the disappointment that Clemson has been for the last, 3 years. I'm not saying that Miami can't win the ACC, but I really feel like that says a lot more about the direction that Florida is headed if they got undressed like that, basically at home. So, for me, the answer is Notre Dame. Who changed my outlook the most this performance? Because Notre Dame was a team that everybody, they were, I won't say everybody, I don't want to generalize, but they were a very popular pick. When you would see these questions on social media, who's going to start in the top 25 and find their way out and not make the playoff, Notre Dame's name came up quite a bit in those discussions. And with good reason. Marcus Freeman didn't have the best track record in big games, but he ended that on Saturday. That was as impressive a win as you're going to find, I think, in the college football season. His defense was absolutely flying around. It made Connor Wagman look like he was back in Pee Wee. I mean, he looked like he wanted to quit the sport of football. He's throwing up on the sidelines, I just didn't think Notre Dame had that in them. To do that at Kyle Field, obviously very difficult place to play. And then when they tie the game up at 13 apiece in the fourth quarter, you're thinking, okay, they finally are about to get the stop here and do what they have to do to get a win. But Notre Dame would have no part of it. So I would say, my outlook on both Notre Dame this year and Marcus Freeman as a head coach changed drastically with that win on the road.
Yeah, and we talked about their schedule last week, guys, and how it sets up for them to walk into the playoff now, right? And they are one of 9 teams that is favored to go to the playoff on the board at BetMGM, all minus money. I mentioned Georgia's minus 650 to make the playoffs. Ohio State still minus 700. Notre Dame third on that board, though, at minus 375. Oregon, maybe a team we could talk about later when we talk about question marks after the way they performed in the opening week against Idaho, minus 350. Texas, minus 250. We'll get to them in a little bit as well, having to go up to Ann Arbor. Penn State, minus 200. A lot of people seemed impressed with the way the offense looked. First game under Andy Koltenicky, the new offensive coordinator. And again, having to deal with the delay. Choppy, I can't be a neutral party on this. I was satisfied with the way they looked against West Virginia, but it's West Virginia, and I don't necessarily hold them in very high regard. So I thought they should have gone down to Morgantown and handled business. But I'll ask you, does this offense, after one performance, look like it's enough to take them not just to the college football playoff, but maybe beyond the first round?
It's enough. I mean, look, they got a good quarterback. And if you have a good – the college football landscape has changed to the point where now it doesn't matter how talented your team is. It's just like the NFL. Do you have an elite quarterback or do you not? And, you could stack the deck. There's no more stacking the deck like Nick Saban used to do in terms of just getting all these players. These teams, because of the NIL, they're flawed. It's essentially a form of a salary cap. Now it's about who's got the best quarterback. And if you have a great quarterback, if you have a true NFL quarterback, you are a playoff team. And that's, I think that's the reality of it. And then you have a chance to go deep in the playoffs based on your quarterback. So, yeah, I absolutely think they are, because I think they got a really good quarterback. And if you look at some of the mock drafts, that guy might be, much, much higher off the board than you think going into this year.
John, are people flying too close to the sun here on Penn State, or does Choppy have a point here? Talented quarterback, new offensive coordinator, and as long as you have the quarterback, you can unlock some things.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I kind of feel like this is the stars are aligning. Now, not necessarily because of the West Virginia win. I'm not really convinced because of that. But it's just like, you having the recipe and the ingredients. And, Drew's been in that program for a couple of years now. I thought he showed some things, I mean, that Ohio State game a year ago was gettable. I mean, it was there for the taking by the end of it. I mean, if he played a little bit better, and he will this year. I mean, he'll mature and he'll develop. And, Franklin's showing that he's not afraid to push the pedal on teams. So, yeah, I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer in Penn State. I think they roll this weekend. I mean, you've seen that number come up, right? People are starting to get hip to it, right? That James Franklin likes to, put the pedal to the metal with these numbers. So, yeah, I am a believer in Penn State this year. I mean, is Georgia in a class of its own? I think that's kind of an interesting question. But in terms of the rest of the country, I would say, yeah. They're right there. Penn State's right there in that discussion.
Miami now minus 110 to make the playoff. We talked about Notre Dame. They'll wrap the season up, obviously, against Southern Cal, who looked pretty good as well against LSU. And we can all laugh about Brian Kelly smacking his fist off the table and being, generally Brian Kelly-ish, because it's amusing whether you're well, maybe not if you're an LSU fan. But the story out of that one is USC. And they look like they have a quarterback, and that was the big question. Would they be able, with both of those teams, to be quite honest, going into that game Sunday night? But for USC especially, when you lose the first overall pick in the draft, the question is, how is your team and your offense going to respond? And not only did the offense look pretty solid, but all of a sudden, they've got a defense in Southern Cal, Choppy.
They do for now. How much of that is the fact that Brian Kelly just does poops the bed in the first game every year? I mean, he just does. Let's be fair on that one.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Thank
I don't
you,
know.
by the way, for adding the word. I could,
Yeah.
Does what? And then just says the word poop. Yeah.
Look, man.
Just come out and say what you want to say next time, Choppy. The man almost best.
I almost said the real thing.
Come
there.
on.
I almost said the real thing there. I had to catch myself. But he does, like every year, and he does. And that's such a fake. That was such a fake slam of the table. I'm so angry. Yeah, you sound it. My dad was angry. I mean, he didn't go, I'm so angry at you. No, he didn't say anything like that. So it is a good start, a good sign for USC and for their defense. I do think that, the Big Ten really needs them, because the Big Ten, they're trying to compete with the SEC. They're very, very strong at the top. They need more depth. They need some more depth teams to really kind of catch up to what, the SEC depth-wise historically has been. And they need USC to do that. And if USC is going to be out there allowing 41 points a night, it's going to be more difficult to happen.
Yeah, 3-1, John, the Trojans to make the playoff. I don't know how many teams from the Big Ten get in, and we talked about this a little bit last week, how many teams from each conference get in and who they might be. I mean, if 4 teams from the Big Ten get in, you look at USC's schedule, it's really difficult. They've got some giant landmines in the middle of that thing. But, if they can somehow play defense like they did against LSU, whether you want to blame it on Brian Kelly or give them credit for it, if their quarterback, he doesn't have to be Caleb Williams. He's just got to be what he was Sunday night in Vegas. Right. Maybe they have a chance to be that 4th team from the Big Ten if the Big Ten can get 4 teams in.
Yeah, Miller Moss was brilliant. It felt like he made every big throw he had to make. I don't know exactly how much I want to believe about their defense yet, because if you just look at the offensive performances in this game, I mean, it was low scoring relative to what the total was, but there were 950 yards of offense. It just underperformed the expectation in terms of the yardage and in equating to points, but they could have been there. And if LSU scores on that opening drive, is the game different? I mean, it obviously is different. So I don't want to go crazy over USC's defense just yet, because, again, if you open up and do a little surgery on the box score, you'll see that it maybe wasn't as good. They were kind of playing. They were giving up everything and anything underneath. They had no answer for Lacey on the perimeter. And I'm not sure if that's going to change moving forward. But, I mean, just the fact that they didn't give up 40 is an improvement over last year. I mean, it wouldn't take a lot to be better than last year defensively. So I think what I'm struggling with, guys, I don't know how much better they are. Are they just a little bit better? I mean, they got in there on the run decently in the first half before Emory started kind of getting loose late. So I just don't – I think that's the part I'm struggling with, is like, how much of this do I want to believe about USC's defense? It was better, but my God, it was always going to be better. Couldn't be worse.
It couldn't possibly be worse, exactly. For LSU's sake, they get a chance to bounce back over the next couple of weeks, in particular this Saturday night, laying 51.5, if you can find it on the board at your book, against Nicholls State, although without John Emery. Tore his ACL in practice on Tuesday, now out for the year. Real quick, because we only got like 60 seconds here. Cam Ward's up to 3rd on the Heisman board now. We can talk Heisman specifically later, but Miami looks like a well-oiled machine for a team that's a bunch of portal guys coming in at skill positions, Choppy.
They absolutely do, and he's a total, like the perfect type of transfer portal player. Started at Incarnate Word, which is a very, very small school. Then he goes to Washington State and now Miami. He's a good player, and they're a legit team. Third is third a little jumping a little bit too high. I don't know, but he deserved every bit of accolades that he got over the weekend.
Yeah, we'll go over the Heisman numbers a little bit more later, as I mentioned. Specifically getting into some of those quarterbacks, maybe some non-quarterback guys that may have a look as well. And we got some rivalry games to talk about. Iowa State, Iowa, Colorado, Nebraska, a pair of big-time non-conference rivalry games. Tennessee, NC State, technically on neutral ground in Charlotte. That coming up as well. But we dive right into the big one. The big noon kickoff coming up next. Number 3, Texas, laying more than a touchdown at number 10, Michigan. That gets things moving next right here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
And welcome back in live coast to coast on the BetQL network, on the BetQL YouTube page. Just search for the Odyssey Sports Channel. It is BetQLU. Alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack, and we have got you covered for week 2 of the college football season. We'll take our first look at the Heisman board in a few moments and talk about some of those teams that disappointed us in week 1 as well. But let's dial in on some of this week's biggest games. We'll get to a couple of non-conference rivalry games in a moment, plus a neutral site one, SEC-ACC matchup, big sort of recruiting backyard matchup in Charlotte on Saturday night in a couple of minutes. But the crown jewel of this weekend's slate, John, is big noon, Saturday, Ann Arbor, number 10 Wolverines hosting the number 3 Longhorns under Steve Sarkisian. Longhorns are 7-3, 5-5 against the spread as favorites on the road. Against top 25 teams, just 6-9 under Sark. And Michigan's got this 16-game winning streak going, 23 straight at home, second longest active streak in FBS. This is going to be interesting. I'm curious to see what happens with Michigan's defense if they can get after Quinn Ewers, make him uncomfortable, and then can their offense conversely get things going in the trenches as well against the Texas D-line that shouldn't be as strong personnel-wise as it was a year ago, John?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I think the 7.5 is and the hook there is really important if you can get it. I know it is 7.5 at BetMGM. It's not at other spots, so I'd say that's a good place to bet Michigan if you like Michigan. I would like to sort of know how they might look in a game where they're trailing. I think that's, are they equipped for that kind of a script? We don't know the answer to that yet. I don't know how much they trust their quarterbacks. But there's no question that their recipe is going to be just grinding this out. And I could not get to 7.5 for Texas on the road here. I mean, obviously all quarterbacks look amazing, but I just think there's no way. I mean, if you're laying 7.5, on the road in a big time environment like Michigan, you're not a winning better. I'm not saying that there's no world where 7.5 can't win for Texas, but you're silly to lay that. I mean, especially when this number opened at, 3.5. I mean, you missed the boat if you like Texas, as far as I'm concerned. So at current prices, the only way I could look is Michigan with the 7.5.
Yeah, and Choppy, this Texas team, it doesn't have the same. I would say maybe recently, if you want to go back to last year, but a lot of guys on that roster don't have the same big game experience. This is the first top 10 matchup of the year that maybe Sharon Moore and Michigan have. They've beaten Penn State. They've beaten Ohio State. Obviously, we could talk about the playoffs maybe as a separate entity, but Sark is 1-4 against top 10 teams at Texas. So, it was nice to get to the playoff last year. I kind of agree with John here, though, like, especially with the hook. It's just too much for a team going on the road against, even if Michigan is not what it was last year, a top-flight opponent like this.
Yeah, look, they're certainly not what they were last year. I mean, they lose 13 guys to the NFL. It's a completely different team, different coach, different everything. And, again, this is, kind of what we talked about. And I'm not on the 7.5, but I would be closer to betting Texas 7.5 than Michigan from the standpoint of it's just about the quarterback. It's the quarterback world, and they've got a legitimate one. Like I think it's far more likely that Texas blows out Michigan than Michigan wins the game. Now, maybe I'm just nuts on that one, but I just fall too far to the – if this game was last year, it would be the opposite. Like, Michigan's the experienced team. They've got the experienced quarterback. They're the home team. But this year, Texas has got the experienced quarterback, and now they're not at home. But and the one thing that does scare me is that it is the first road game of the year. I hate that this game's at noon, though. Can we just take the Big Ten, their stupid big noon, and then kick in with their big boot up their big butt? I mean, I just can't stand it. These games do not belong at 11 a.m. I'm sorry. No important college football game should ever be played before like 3 o'clock. That's it. Like this. Can we just make this a national presidential election? You make that a rule, I'm voting for you. Like that's my criteria here. But yeah, I'm not on the bet. I'm not on the line. I think the line's too much. But if I was going to place a bet, it probably would be on Texas in the 7.5.
42.5 on the total is interesting too. Might be an angle on that before we wrap up here today. Let's move on to Saturday night. 7:30 Eastern. It's being played at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, the Carolina Panthers home. So a neutral site game here between number 14 Tennessee and number 24 NC State. Tennessee 7-2 against the spread in their last 9 as favorites. NC State, they were trailing Western Carolina 21-17 going to the fourth quarter last week, guys. They're without their starting safety, Devin Boykin. They are 1-9 in their last 10 games against the SEC, for what that's worth. I was highly unimpressed, John, with NC State last week. Tennessee, very impressed. Again, we'll talk Heisman later, but Nico Iamaleava, 10-1 now on the Heisman board. Looked really good last week, over 300 yards, granted against Chattanooga, I know, for what it's worth. But I really like Tennessee in this spot against NC State.
Yep. NC State plays at 3.35, which, against a coach like Josh Heupel is just never going to work. I think this is a spot where Tennessee can really run this game up. And it's obviously reflected in the number here. I don't think that's anything that's not already priced in, but I think there are really starting to be questions about Grayson McCall and, is he really the same quarterback now that he's, away from Chadwell and out of that system? Is he a creation? And so, I think for Tennessee here, Josh Heupel has shown when he has accurate, electric quarterbacks, he can be super successful. We also, by the way, saw what happened the last time an SEC team played an ACC team on a neutral site. They're still picking up body parts from Clemson at Mercedes-Benz. So yeah. I don't see any reason why this would necessarily be different, right? I really don't. It kind of feels very similar. They're not the same class. Tennessee's not the same class as Georgia. NC State's not the same class as Clemson. But I still think the results will probably be similar. I think Tennessee's going to be able to go down the field and score, at will. And I think it's going to be more of an effort for NC State to do that against them.
RJ, with your Vols having Nico and a bunch of 6'4" track stars in the receiving core, this thing continues to get out farther and farther, all the way out to 10 as we're sitting here talking about it right now. I don't know what the number would have to be. I think I'm more in line with John here that this thing could get away and get away quick. I mean, maybe if you got out to like 13 and a half, I'd walk away from this one. But this Tennessee team looks like high octane, this offense especially.
They do. There's some shades of Hooker in 2022 with this team. Like that. The whole thought process, like John said, that if Heupel's got an accurate quarterback, I mean, they just kind of run downhill. The total is the one that is like, all right, is Tennessee, is NC State going to score enough, to help that total get over 60? I think 10 is a good number. I think it started 4.5, and it's already up to 10. It might go to 11 by kickoff. I hope I get to watch it. I don't know. I'm a DirecTV guy, so maybe I won't be able to watch this game. I don't know.
Oh, no.
So we'll see. We'll find out. You guys may just be
unacceptable.
Yeah, you guys are going to have to FaceTime me or something, and then just put this, hold the phone up to the screen. And I can watch. It'd be great.
There you go. That's being flexible on your toes, right? Yeah. Switching up however you got to watch the game. I thought they still haven't handled the DirecTV thing. Come on, people, get it together. What are we doing?
They have not.
Just ridiculous. 2 non-conference rivalry games to talk about Saturday afternoon, early evening between Colorado, Nebraska. Huskers laying 7.5 against the Buffaloes, who come in. I don't know. It's North Dakota State. I guess I know North Dakota State's good. I get it for their level, but there were still times where Colorado's offensive line looked atrocious. And then a couple hours earlier than that, another non-conference rivalry game, Iowa State and Iowa in the Cy-Hawk game. Hawkeyes are ranked 21st. They're laying 3.5 at home. 4 of the last 5 games in this series have gone under what is currently the total of 35. We've got a 33 in there, a 34, a 17, a 16. But Iowa, John, looks like they may actually have a semi-competent offense now. 40 points last week, granted against Illinois State, but 40 points.
Yeah. I mean, y'all can have it, man. Y'all can have it. Y'all bet the over on
Not
Iowa.
buying
Y'all
it.
can have it.
Not buying it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the over has been bet in this game. I suppose I understand it. Iowa mystifies me because, like, every single college football coach has adapted to the new world except Kirk Ferentz. Like, he's just like, I don't care what everybody else is doing. I'm going to be comfortable playing in games that are lined with totals of 35. And he just keeps doing it. And he keeps getting away with it. Everybody keeps letting him do it. But I can't remember the last time I've bet an Iowa total. And that's not going to change this week.
Who gives first in their steadfast hard-headedness, Kirk or Dabo, in the refusal to use the transfer portal and the NIL? Like, sooner or later, now, like, they've both earned the right to do it their way, but sooner or later, your AD's got to take you by the head, like, bro, man, like, good enough, our way or go find another job, man. Like, those two, it's awful. It really is. Watching Iowa try to play offense and watch whatever Dabo's got working down there.
Yeah, whoever's first to an 8-loss season probably gets told, "Hey, change the way you do things, or the door's right over there." They held your guy Rocco Beck to 203 yards though last year in this matchup, Choppy, and he was a true freshman. I know you're all high on Rocco Beck. But
huge Rocco fan.
So tell me, is 3.5 enough against these Cyclones, or are you all in on this number?
I'm completely I would completely stay away. I'm with John. You could not get me to bet an Iowa game right now. You couldn't do it. I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, nothing. That's what you expect in an Iowa game.
That's right.
A whole lot of nothing.
Right.
A whole lot of nothing.
Expect nothing.
Over under on punts. Always take the double digits. Colorado, Nebraska. I mentioned the 2 non-conference rivalry games. How about this? This is a really interesting number Zach dug up, our producer. Matt Rule a combined 8-28 in his first seasons at Temple, Baylor, and Nebraska. But in second years, 14-9 so far. That's between his second year at Temple, second year at Baylor, and 1 game at Nebraska in his second year. Huskers have only covered 3 of their last 10 games, though. Colorado comes in having covered 6 of their last 8 as a dog. I'm sorry. Colorado's offensive line, John, at times had me worried for Shedeur Sanders' health. Like I wanted to get him a Guardian cap, one of those big plastic bubbles they put around the kids to play like the sumo game at halftime, and absolutely everything else we could find, because he's going to get destroyed by the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm not convinced at all about Colorado being some vastly improved team. We hear all offseason about how the trenches is better, and then they, are barely hanging on against an FCS team. I will say this though, that has nothing to do with a 7.5 point spread. When you're getting 7.5 points, and they play the way they play, Nebraska, as you point out, is just not ever known for blowing teams out and running up scores here. I don't think they will do it in this game. And I'll also add this: if Nebraska is down, or excuse me, if Colorado is down 2 touchdowns with 45 seconds left, I mean, we know that Prime is dialing up some stuff to get Shedeur some numbers. So I just think Colorado is going to be one of the better chase teams in America when they're behind, and I think they are going to be behind quite a bit. And I think that, again, kind of like in Michigan, I think that hook is pretty important. So even if this is a 2-score game late, I still think Colorado and Deion, they were throwing when they were up. They're the victory formation. They were dialing up shots, save clocks. Imagine if they're trailing. So I think the only way I could look here is 7 and a hook here for the Buffaloes. I think they will keep it inside that number.
Are you accusing Deion Sanders of daddy ball? Are you?
Yeah, daddy
is
ball,
that what you're saying? Are we saying that? Okay, all right. Okay. There we go.
That's the OC. The OC is daddy ball.
Daddy ball. I'm with you. I don't like the number here. My question with this game is not like Colorado. It's how much improved is Nebraska?
Yeah.
From the last matchup from last year. Like how much better is Nebraska now? I think it's considerable. I'm a big fan of Matt Rule in terms of his program building. I saw him do it at Waco. He did a really, really nice job in Waco after Art Briles. It was a fantastic job that he did. It was very Bill O'Brien-esque at Penn State. So I'm a big fan of Matt Rule as a college coach, not an NFL, but I don't love the number. If I was going to bet it, I'd probably go Colorado.
Yeah, still some 7s out there last I checked. Those are the biggest games of the weekend. What about the biggest disappointments from week 1? We'll go over a couple teams that should be worried and take our first extended look at the Heisman board as well. That's all next. Alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin, I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL. with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU, live coast to coast on the BetQL network and brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Before we leave, maybe some final futures to throw at you, because we're going to take a look at the Heisman board. And we will talk the biggest losers of week one of the college football season before we get out the door as well. Don't forget, every Friday and Saturday inside that BetMGM Sportsbook app, there's a college football no-sweat parlay token waiting for you, an offer that really has legs. See what we did there? Yeah. At least 3 of them, hopefully. A college football no-sweat parlay token. If it doesn't hit, slow down, Choppy. You'll get your stake back in bonus bets. Got to be at least 4-1 odds, plus 400, and a minimum of 3 legs. That's why I said that, Choppy. Get your mind out of the gutter. Attach the token to your qualifying wager in the bet slip. Make sure you check everything out inside your BetMGM Sportsbook app. Oh, man. This is how it goes every weekend here on BetQLU. Always very close to going off the rails and sometimes totally off. Choppy, I'll give you a chance to catch your breath. John, who's the biggest loser of week number 1? Is it Florida State? Is it possible to choose anyone else if we're not going with Florida State? Clemson, LSU, I don't know. Do we worry at all? Definitely not the biggest loser since they, won, but do we worry at all about Oregon, for example, struggling a bit at home with Idaho? When we talk about the biggest losers from week one, who do we talk about first?
Yeah, I mean, it's close. It's real close, but I think you have to say Florida State. They lost week 0 and they lost week 1. The big losers in both weeks. I mean, and the only reason I say, Florida State and not Clemson is because Florida State was the team that was favored by 16.5 at home. Clemson was a 10.5, 11.5, 12.5 point dog. It maybe shouldn't have looked as bad as it did, but they were supposed to lose that game. Florida State, they were supposed to bounce back. That was supposed to be the get-right game against a first-year head coach in a Boston College team that hasn't done anything since Matt Ryan. And they got beat from front to back, start to finish, every which way, you name it. I mean, it was just an outclassing. Boston College runs for 200 yards against what was a defensive line that's supposed to be, much improved, or not much improved, I'd say, but reloaded and was hyped up all offseason. I don't really think there's any other answer here. I mean, Florida State in the midst of one of the most disappointing starts for a top 10 team in college football history.
Choppy, is there anyone other than Florida State that's worth talking about as the biggest loser?
I mean, look, that's the right answer. It's the easy answer. Let me offer something else, though. The SEC is the big loser. A&M losing at home to Notre Dame. LSU losing to USC. Florida getting destroyed at home and embarrassed by an in-state rival. South Carolina almost losing to Old Dominion. Mm-hmm. That's not the start the conference is accustomed to.
Yeah.
And that they got beat by every which way. They got beat at home, they got beat by a conference rival, and they got beat by a school out west. And the SEC hates to lose to two things: one, schools out west, and schools in the Big Ten. And they wound up losing to both of them in one game. And it's a bad day for them. So yeah, Florida State's the easy answer, but the conference needs to get called out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably point out the ACC, too. All of a sudden going from a conference that, look, nobody thought the ACC was going to be a powerhouse this year, but at the very least, you thought going into the season you'd have 2 or 3 teams at least who would be battling with each other all the way down the stretch this year, and now it just simply looks like Miami and everybody else. Clemson, for what it's worth, I guess, gets to bounce back against App State on Saturday night, although that might be one. 17 points. Clemson should bounce back and handle business, but would any of us be totally shocked if App State, because that's basically a loser go home kind of game. Clemson can't afford to lose again this year, and App State being a group of 5 team, if they want to stay alive in that conversation, can't really afford to lose either. I mentioned earlier LSU a chance to bounce back this week against Nicholls State, but trying to deal with the loss of John Emery as well. Florida, who you alluded to there, Choppy, one of those SEC teams whose head coach can't even open a water bottle. A lot of big losers in week 1 around college football. Let's take a look at the Heisman board because we got a couple minutes to do so on the way out the door here. Dylan Gabriel's still the favorite at plus 650 at BetMGM. I mentioned Oregon struggling a little bit with Idaho. He still completed 41 passes for 380 yards. Carson Beck right there with him, plus 750. Quarterback of Georgia, 278 yards, a couple of touchdowns against Clemson. And we already talked about Cam Ward at Miami and Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. Jackson Dart, 5 touchdowns for Ole Miss against Furman, still sitting there right at about 10-1. A couple other names maybe farther down on the board that could jump out at you, but just after 1 week, guys, or a week plus, when you look at the Heisman board, John, where's the best value look for you so far?
I mean, I don't mind, taking a flyer on Jackson Dart at 10-1. I mean, and the reason why I say that is because, when you're trying to make these cases for the playoff, like at a place like Ole Miss, like for example, I'm on Ole Miss this week. They're minus that. I got them at minus 41.5. I think it's out to 42.5, 43. And the reason why I don't care is because I know what Lane Kiffin is about to do. Like, he's going to have Jackson Dart go out there and throw 7 touchdowns and run the score up. Like, I don't remember what the score was last week, but it was bloody. And in these stomp fests that Lane Kiffin is now taking full advantage of, Jackson Dart's going to throw for a lot of scores. And so, if that's the way it's going to look, and if he has, if Ole Miss's defense is improved and they can, win a few more games than usual, then I think Dart's going to be right in that conversation, as the signal caller. So, look, I mean, Cam Ward's hard to turn down at 8-1. I mean, he looked amazing last week, and that offense is just humming. But I think, if you're trying to get in the 4 digits here at 10-1, I think Jackson Darts is probably worth it.
Choppy,
look,
Jalen Milrose in there too, 12-1. I mean, a couple 5 total touchdowns last week. Again, consider the competition, Western Kentucky, but if you want a guy from the SEC who's going to be in big primetime games all year against quality opponents, that might be worth a look as well.
It is. I think I threw a little coin down on Nico, my guy, and he's going to be there because they're going to. I mean, his offense is going to throw up a ton of points. I also think. Look, we know what this is about, right? You also have to be on a really good team. It's going to come from basically a guy whose team makes the playoffs. I think Quinn Ewers is going to be a really solid quarterback all year. If he goes into Michigan and he puts up a really nice day, that campaign will already start. He's a very high-profile quarterback at a high-profile school. And then you can't. I don't think you can ever discount the Colorado kids. I really don't. I don't think you can discount Shador. I don't think you can discount Travis Hunter. They are whether Colorado is 11-2 or 2-11, they're going to get more publicity than basically any other quarterback there is or any other players that there are. And so if you're looking for a non-quarterback, I mean, it's Travis, man. He's a great player. He is arguably the best player in the draft coming up, or one of the 4 or 5. So I think those are 2 good flyers.
I mean, Travis Hunter at 15-1 then at BetMGM, and I think longer numbers at some other shops is definitely worth a good look then. 7 catches, 132 yards. He's going to be Sanders' primary target, especially in the red zone, because Dion understands the Heisman game as well as any of these other coaches as well. Plus, you throw in the ability to maybe pick off a big ball and run one back at some point or a couple times this season. That's always a possibility with Travis Hunter as well. If we're talking about quarterbacks from good teams, though, if we want to limit it to that part of the conversation, teams that are going to the playoff, can we make a case? Any love for Cam Rising? 35-1 at BetMGM, 40-1 in other spots. Only threw 15 passes last week, but it was against Southern Utah. 5 of his 10 completions were for touchdowns, John. This is a guy who, he's not going to put up 5 touchdowns every week, but if Utah goes 11-1, 12-1, wins the Big 12, and is one of those top 4 teams in the playoff, or at least one of the 4 teams that gets a bye, I guess I should say, that's going to be a guy who's making noise statistically with some of these SEC quarterbacks we just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're the price is the difference there, right? That he's been in that offense for a million years. I think I don't mean to bring up the negatives here. The issue is, can I count on him to make it through a full season? He's battled that for the last couple of years, and I do sort of wonder if the run game kind of eats into that. But I mean, you're dealing with, like you said, 35 to 40 to 1. So, if all those things happen, do you think Utah will sort of, maybe not run the table, but like you said, 11-1? If you believe that, then I do think that's a good price. I mean, is it going to win? Is it going to get you over the finish line? I think that's one of the questions. But it will be a lot better, or I should say worse, than 35 or 40 to 1, in late October if Utah gets off to the start that we think they might.
Choppy, before we run, I'm going to let you have the first crack at any best bets or final futures. It's still early enough in the season that there's really good numbers on futures, whether it's a natty championship bet, whether it's a playoff bet, a Heisman bet, or maybe simply something for this week that you have cooked up.
I do like App State this week. I don't have any huge college futures I dive more into the NFL futures on that one, but I do like App State in the 17. That's a big number. They're a quality program. I don't think Clemson. I really do. If you were to ask Dabo right now, he's probably regretting that they scheduled this game. You don't schedule App State. Everybody knows that. You don't schedule them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Michigan House.
Especially after a letdown like that.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just going to come in there and squash App State. I'm going to lay 20.5 with the Oregon Ducks. Whack, whack. Boise State's jumping up in competition here, and I'm not sure they picked the right quarterback. I think Taylor Green is the superior talent, and he's playing for the Arkansas Razorbacks now. Last year when Boise went outside their league with a regional Power 5 team, they got crushed. That was 56-19 against Washington and Michael Penix as 14.5-point underdogs. This Oregon team is pissed off because they underachieved last week. The offensive line's getting healthier. And I just think this jump up is going to prove to be a little bit too much. And I think, great week for, the running back last week. But I think the jump up is going to be proved to be too much for the Broncos here.
One more quick one. If you can still get Penn State at less than 35, go ahead and do that. James Franklin loves to cover. He'll do it against a Mack team at home. Definitely. We'll be back next week to get you ready for week 3 right here on the BetQL Network alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. This has been BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it. I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your